President Trump made an announcement at the end of September that America is going to be reducing the number of refugees, number of refugees we Americans will admit to America. It's actually going to be under 20,000 starting in the year 2020. This is a drop in number even from the previous year and the year before that. So naturally, there's a lot of reaction from the American left complaining that this number, 20,000, is just far too few refugees for America to be offering. We're one of the wealthiest nations on earth, probably the wealthiest, and why can't we be more generous to refugees? To be really clear, we have 1 million immigrants come to America every year. Not refugees, immigrants, legal immigrants. On top of that, which is an extraordinarily generous number, on top of that, we have been very welcoming to refugees. But one of the things President Trump ran on was being more careful about who comes here as refugees. And I want to talk in the first 5 today about something that's happening in Sweden, because it really relates to our thinking about refugee policy. In the country of Sweden, which is obviously one of the Scandinavian countries, in the country of Sweden, they had an extremely generous refugee policy, meaning took in many, many refugees. They've only recently begun cutting back on the number of refugees they will permit. They still will permit many, many more than many of their neighbors. They actually got neighboring countries. They got an award from the United Nations for, it was talking about they're one of the greatest examples of a bridging nation, bridging the gap, helping people who are coming from countries where they're war torn. These aren't really economic refugees. They're pretty much Islamic refugees coming to Sweden and other countries because of war in their homeland. So they were rated exemplary by the UN and got a nice little prize in 2015. But they actually have, in Sweden, they have cities that are now coming forward, people coming forward saying, it's become dangerous. This is unwise. We don't have a refugee policy here that really reflects the needs of the Swedish people. There is very much a central planning mindset in Sweden. Central planning starting in the 1920s, organizing where you live and how you live and providing housing for people who couldn't afford it. So it's a very centrally planned economy and centrally planned country. And within Sweden, the government, of course, went along with the United Nations efforts, desire to have to handle the refugees fleeing violence in Islamic countries. But the story that's out today, I want to share as a basis for thinking about what refugee policy should really reflect. In one little town in Sweden, described as a picturesque town of Filipstad, a town, the population of 10,000 people. By the way, Sweden has 10 million people. 10 million people. Over 14% of the people living in Sweden were born in other countries. Over 14%. And of that 14%, 65% of them were born in countries outside of the EU. Basically, they have a very large population in Sweden of people born in Islamic majority countries. So in this town of Filipstad, they had, for example, that in fact the town and the historians are now calling it a population exchange. A population exchange is a trendy word to say that as more Islamic refugees, mostly from Somalia, move into some of the smaller towns in Sweden, so many problems emerge. Crime, tremendous drain on the social welfare system, a confrontation of cultures, a mistreatment of native Swedish people by Islamic refugees who do not approve of the way Western women dress and act. So in this town, between 2012 and 2018, you had 640 native Swedish people, like people born and raised there. 640 Swedish people left and 963 foreign-born people moved in. So this is just one example, one town. They've also had within Sweden, of course, a history of extremely troublesome rioting and problems of various kinds caused by Islamic refugees for a variety of reasons. People can point to poverty, they can point to not familiarity, not feeling welcomed, but the Islamic population in Sweden does not wish to assimilate. Overall, that is a problem. They don't want to become part of the Western culture of Sweden. They want to bring Islamic culture to Sweden. Very different, very much of a confrontation. And so you've had extreme reports of increased gang violence, assaults, shootings, bombs, car torturings. torching, excuse me. They had a story on August 31st of this year, a woman, Emma Zetterholm, who chose to leave Malmo, which is one of the major areas that has pretty much a large no-go zone made up of Islamic refugees. She's lived there her whole life. She said, no, she's lived there 18 years. She had to leave because the violence in Malmo emerging from the no-go zones controlled by Islamic refugees was getting closer and closer and closer to her home, her children, her family. She's leaving. They've had extreme problems. They had violence in numerous other places within Sweden. Coming from the Islamic majority communities. And there's really an uprising toward the government by Swedish people saying, why are you doing this to us? Why are you bringing so many refugees here? No effort to encourage assimilation, no assessment ahead of time. Are these people employable? Do they want to work? Are they looking for jobs? Or are they going to come here and become dependent on Sweden's extremely generous welfare system? So it's the people against the government realizing the problem and trying to say, wait a minute, hold off here in this refugee thing. Last thing, just to give you some context for numbers. Sweden is 10 million people. They just announced recently they're going to cut back the number of refugees they may bring to their country to no more than 110,000 starting next year. Well, if you start to do that math, just think about this. In America, we have 320 million people, roughly. So 1% of 320 million people would be about the size of the city of Philadelphia. So if our government said, we're going to bring essentially 1% population growth, all of refugees to America every year, it would be like bringing the size of the city of Philadelphia to America in the form of refugees year after year after year after year. You can see why the people of Sweden are upset. They want their government to take into consideration the needs of the people, the homogeneity, the connection of the people within Sweden. Sweden has, as many of the Nordic countries have, they have a commonality. They have commonality in appearance, religion, background. Many of them have lived in those countries their whole lives. I am not against immigration. I'm in favor of immigration. I'm in favor of people being able to move freely. And I'm in favor of even the idea, and not objecting, and I don't think the people in Sweden are objecting to the unbelievable influx of refugees based on color. It's not about skin color. It's not about race. It's not about ethnicity. It is about a culture that is coming forward from Islamic majority countries, the refugees coming into Sweden and creating all sorts of problems that the Swedish culture just was not ready to adapt to deal with, to handle. So Sweden may be a good example for us. If you think that you would like America to bring in the size of the city of Philadelphia every year in Islamic refugees from Somalia, then you should probably check out Sweden, this haven that we always hear Bernie Sanders talk about. But really what's happening at the core is a recognition by the people, the citizens, that is way ahead of the recognition the Swedish government has made of what kind of what problems flow from lack of assimilation, lack of understanding on the part of the Islamic refugees of Western culture and of Swedish culture, and the notion that somehow that so far the government is not acting like it's a problem, that the Swedes are moving out of the country as more refugees move in. But they are discovering that they're having a trouble with their tax base because the people moving in aren't working, aren't paying taxes. The Swedes moving out are the ones who worked hard their whole lives, pay into the system, and they're not going to stay there anymore if they can see their government doesn't listen to them about the need to bring into consideration in the refugee policy the culture and fabric of the Swedish people. And that, my friends, is today's First Five.